Welcome to r/Tales from Security, where we share stories of physical security, loss prevention, protective services, and anyone in general who gets paid to watch people, etc. And the first story is, Crazy has been my greatest teacher. Some of the lessons I learned working mental health. I haven't worked hospital security for long, but I sure have learned a lot. The training provided by my company was garbage, so I owe my super and team a lot for taking me under their wing and teaching me actual practical skills in my early days. That being said, the most important lessons I've learned have been from my charges, the mental patients. Below are some of them, occasionally accompanied by a story to relate. Fairly long, so I'm dividing them into sections with bold headers. Everyone's got something to blame, except themselves. Being MH, mental health, a lot of the MH patients had problems. From addictions to mental illness to placing themselves or others at risk with their behavior. But those were just the problems they came in with. What's of more concern are the problems they have once inside. Getting their privileges revoked, having their involuntary stay extended, and being physically restrained and/or chemically sedated. Thing is, 75% of the time they bring these problems upon themselves through their own actions. There was this kid, let's call him Abe, in the child section of the mental ward. Involuntarily admitted due to doing drugs with his boys, and then doing idiotically starting fights out in public. Thing with Abe was, he was close to getting discharged multiple times. Seriously, I spoke with his nurse and the psychiatrist, and quite often the kid was close to getting out. Except, it got postponed every time. The first time, Abe got impatient a day before his release, started a fight with the nurse, causing a code white, violence or potential violence call, and had to be restrained. The second time, he tried running while out on a privilege break with his nurse, causing another code white, where we had to handcuff him and drag his A back into the ward. Of course, Abe, being the genius he is, tried to swing, kicking some other random nurse on the way back, while we had him in cuffs and were on both sides holding him, which led to another restraint. Third time was a while after. He was on good behavior and through some blessing actually made it to the meeting with his psychiatrist. Of course, I get a call a while later for a patient standby, and there's Abe, peeved at being denied his discharge. The reason? In a noble display of honesty, he admitted to the psychiatrist and his mom that he'd been smoking weed with his boys the second he was out to celebrate. While I respected his forthcoming nature, I later tried explaining to him that maybe he should have shut the F up about that little detail during the meeting, and advised him to do so for the next one. Every time we'd take down, restrain, or chemically sedate Abe, he'd always have an excuse. My mom's keeping me here. No, it's your decision to do dumb SH right before your psychiatrist meeting. The nurse made me angry. They asked you to take your meds, but you chose to act on the anger from that and start a fight. Security keeps putting me in restraints. And why are we called to do that, Abe? But I, and now you, know the truth. Abe's problems were largely of his own making. Sure, there were likely situational factors which led to him getting locked up in an MH ward, but every time he was close to leaving, he did something of his own accord to F it up. We, the nurses and security team who lovingly paid him visits, finally coached him enough that he managed to keep straight and get out. But Abe's story is an unfortunate reminder that most people love to make excuses without realizing that a lot of the time, they're the reason for their own problems. Beware the silent ones. Nobody likes being told that they're now involuntarily admitted to the MH ward, and the majority of them take to expressing their displeasure by being barkers. I love barkers. Them being busy barking means they're not trying to start a fight. It means they're still open to verbal communication. And even for the ones that did turn physical despite barking, there were nice and clear signs that they were about to scrap. Clenched fists, squared up posture, etc. The quiet ones, on the other hand, they always set me on edge. I don't know if it's because I can't read them as easily as I can a barker, but the silent MH patients always made me wary, since I was going in with a lot less info than I would otherwise have. Thing is, you don't know if a silent patient's good or bad. They certainly have no verbal tells, and their physical tells are hard to spot as well. We had a guy, let's call him Waldo, who was the epitome of silence. He'd say nothing, except when he wanted food or drinks or a shower. Just stay in his room and sometimes erratically wander the halls. And most importantly, randomly cause code whites. What we thought was random wandering was often him casing the exit doors, which led to him often making escape attempts. He also tried assaulting our guys on a few occasions, which unfortunately didn't end too well for Waldo. Every time we had a code with this guy, nobody knew beforehand that it was going to happen. Waldo just spontaneously acted upon good opportunities. While I didn't deal with Waldo overly much, he taught me the stark lesson of always being on 110% guard against the quiet ones. If you watched him very closely, you would notice in hindsight how a lot of his silence was a mask, a sort of poker face, so we wouldn't know what he was planning and when he would attempt an escape. I am now always paranoid around the quiet patients. Who knows what they're planning? Sir talk doesn't always work. Formal language, such as "could you please remain detained against your will, sir," doesn't always work. Sure, there's a time and a place for it in many situations, and I'm certain you folk who work in corporate or commercial sites have a lot more use for it than I do. But it just isn't very feasible in mental health, especially when a lot of MH people are coming hot off the street. You try to spin that sir nonsense with an MH patient who's been told they're now detained for the weekend, and you're gonna get an angry MH patient who thinks you're part of what's keeping them here. I learned early on that instead of trying to talk all fancy, you gotta level with the person you're talking to, which often means bringing out a more genuine dialect. In fact, of all my stories from hospital security, the ones I'm most proud of are the ones where I prevent codes from happening altogether, by leveling with and just talking with the guy or gal. One such story was with a guy called Shaq. Shaq didn't like the fact that he was involuntarily admitted to the hospital, so he got mad, took his shirt off, and started pacing around his room demanding to go home. Of course, this led to a code white being called, and I run up there. Of course, I find the nurse and management trying to sir-talk the guy from outside the room, since they were scared, which of course just gets him more worked up, and I saw it wasn't working, so I stepped in. Mind you, a lot of the conversation is roughly off memory, and I skipped some of the useless filler parts, but the general wording is roughly accurate. "Yo, what's going on, my man? I hear a code white called and run over, but I don't see you doing anything. You sure you're the one I'm called for?" He visibly calms down at seeing the first person to actually enter the room and speak to him human to human, looks at me and says, "I just want to go home." I then explain to him what's making the staff outside so wary of him. "So I'm gonna be real with you. They called a code white for you because they're scared. They see a shirtless young guy walking around and he's MH, it scares them. So how about we take one step for now and at least put your shirt back on, just to show them that you're good. Because you and I both know that the shirt coming off means a scrap's about to go down, and that's what it looks like to them." In the middle of this, a nurse thinks it's a great idea to walk in with a set of restraints in naked view, and suggests to me quietly that he needs to go in restraints. Of course, I veto that idea and send her out of the room. So they're using words like restraint, but I don't agree with that. I get that a code was called, but honestly, man, you seemed good to me. Just a little agitated at not being allowed to go home. Way I see it, if you were gonna do something, you would have done it already. Yet you're not going out there trying to fight. You're just pacing inside your own room and just talking. By this point, he's calmed down a lot, and my words seem to have helped him understand that not everyone's out to get him. He replies with, "Yeah, somebody gets it," and puts his clothes back on as a sign to the staff that he isn't aggressive. Situation eventually ends as other great members of my team calm him further, and he's allowed to go home. In that situation, no amount of sir talk would have helped. In fact, it was making him madder. On the other hand, somebody leveling with him helped get him out of a lose-lose situation, both for us and him. To be continued. Honestly, I'm not the best writer, and I don't know how well my choppily put together stories and cringeworthy dialogue flow, but if you guys like the stories, I have more lessons I learned involving nurse stupidity, how you sometimes have to rough people up to curb their violent behavior, the fun stuff, and more general insanity, which I'm happy to post as an edit tomorrow. It's pretty late at night for me. The second story is, fellow security officers of Reddit, worst thing you've seen a new guy do? I work as a full-time security officer. I've done so for going on about 6 years now. I've seen quite a few people get fired right on their first day, but was never there for the start of it. Just overhearing mostly by the end of the day. But the day I became a site sergeant of a brand new site my company was taking was the best one I've seen yet. Worked at a Fred Meyer's, grocery store for those who don't know, and we were to manage the bottle drop. Basically where homeless lads and ladies go to turn in bottles, cans, plastic, etc. I was to train someone for their half of the week. I work 4 days, they work 3. Simple. Rules are simple as well, but I won't get into them unless requested. Lad comes to work, no uniform. We generally get all our uniforms from the head office, but sometimes people end up sneaking by without getting it. Site sergeants carry a set of small, medium, and large in their cars for this reason. I toss him one, he throws it on and scurries up to our break room to change into it. Comes back, uniform on, and he's wearing all the clothes he had on before over it, nix the pants. So hoodie, studded belt. I gave him the general talk, mostly trying to cut him a break since he's only 18. First job ever. We don't have enough time to dawdle though, as our shift started about 6 minutes ago, and we get him down the line at the bottle drop. I start explaining the basics, have to end up repeating all of them, cause at the end, he takes out his earbuds, the ones built into the hoodie, and asks, "Oh SH, didn't know you were explaining, sorry." I'm pretty sure he's high out of his mind, but again, giving him a break. We get through about 40 minutes of that, so about a total of 50 minutes have already passed, and we stand around. It's a boring job 90% of the time. Then a guy in full black comes sprinting out of the door through the parking lot. Kinda suspect, but we didn't get a call at all from loss prevention, who managed the inside, so he can't do anything. Kid books after him, and full-on shoulder checks him into a shrub, with me following shortly behind, absolutely stunned. He turns around, smile on his face, like he just did the world's greatest deed. Sees the look of horror on my face, does a double take, and finally sprints off down the street. Technically, I never even had to fire him. We're a company with a strict hands-off policy, unless it's to protect ourselves or someone else. Instant dismissal. Guy wasn't even a thief either, just some weirdo running. He was alright, excessively confused though. The last story is, sorry, can't let you in. Sorry it's been a while. Life just happened. I'm sure you know how it is. This is a simple story, but it never fails to make me laugh. Hope you enjoy. This happened early 2018. The plant had just started to undergo renovations, and part of those renovations involved knocking part of the perimeter wall down to make way for a new driveway. Now, I have no problem at all with this. I did my patrols as scheduled and watched the wall carefully. The power company told the construction company that they had to hire their own security for that hole because it was unguarded, and they really wanted my post to be at the front gate, so they complied. So those security guards had to be signed in, as they didn't have their own badges, and the company wanted a record of them for liability. Sure, I can do that. I asked them their IDs and gave them a temp badge every time they changed their shifts, except for one guy. Let's call him Kevin. This guy showed up, and I told him that I needed his ID for the record. This was the conversation that followed. Kevin, I'm not giving you my ID. Me, I don't know who you are. I can't let you in without it. Kevin, well, my name's Kevin. Let me in. Me, no sir, I need some ID for verification. Kevin now looking super angry, and I need your manager's phone number. Now, it's like 3 a.m. My manager is not awake and gets grumpy when we call him too early, but I comply. I give him my manager's number, and I call corporate and explain the situation. So while he leaves my boss a message about how much of a B I am, I've got corporate security on the line, telling me to not let him in, that they'll call my manager and explain the situation, and also send him the security video for reference. So this guy, who is now late to his shift, and I are having a stare down after he gets off the phone, and after a few minutes, my very tired manager calls me and requests to be put on speaker. I do, and he tells me to call the police if the guy won't either A, leave, or B, give me his ID so that I can sign him in. He hears this and goes wide-eyed, like a deer in headlights. Haha. So finally, 20 minutes later, he reaches into his wallet, pulls out his ID and gives it to me. I sign him in and let him through. Little did he know that I was also the one in charge of getting new badges for the entire plant. So guess whose didn't go into the system for like another 3 weeks? And guess who had to badge him every time? A minor thing for me, but he was peeved every time. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories, and have a good day.